Good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. My name is Councillor Andy Booth and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Please note that this meeting may be recorded and that staff in the building can use body-worn cameras throughout the premises. Data captured during the recording will be processed and retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy, and the meeting recording may be published on the Council's website. On the agenda pack, I'll come to a couple of items in a moment, but firstly, item 1, emergency evacuation procedure. We are not expecting the fire bell to sound this evening. If it does, it will be for real. So please make your way in an orderly fashion via the 2 exits on the left and the right to the car park below, where Democratic Services and other officers will help and assist to keep everybody safe. Do not use the lift under any circumstances, please. On exiting the building, you'll be directed to an assembly point, and at an appropriate time, you will be invited back into the building unless there is no building to return to. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by the members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice. Planning permission is not granted or refused until that notice has been issued. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notification. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are prohibited from voting. Any members acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated. If you do not, you will not be allowed to vote on that particular item. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak. You'll come to the centre chair in front of me. There is a microphone and a keypad. It'll all be simple once we get there. You'll have 3 minutes and there's an audible sign for 30 seconds left. Having considered the agenda this evening, I'm going to keep it in the order that we will run as normal. Okay. A couple of bits of housekeeping first. Primarily for members of the public, to enable members of the committee to discuss and engage on a particular item. From the chair, I will recommend in line with the officer recommendation. That will then be seconded, hopefully by somebody as a member. We can then start the debate on that item. Just because I go in favour with the officer's recommendation, as does the seconder, does not automatically mean I'm going to vote that way or they're going to vote that way. Okay? It's just a formality. Thank you. Can everybody please ensure that their phones or electronic devices are set to silent, because they don't bounce well out of the window. Agenda item 2. Tim, please. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Jays, who is being substituted by Councillor Nundy, and Councillor Speed, who is being substituted by Councillor Bowen. We've also received a further apology from Councillor Golding. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Councillor Nundy and Councillor Bowen, for substituting this evening. Councillor Nundy.
Yeah, is there a limit on the planning training?
Tim.
Councillor Nundy, I did confirm when you were nominated as a substitute, you are still in valid training for another year.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to double check, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. We can run another course for you, Tom, if you want another one.
No, I'm in date. It's fine.
Councillor Cheeseman.
Thank you. You didn't mention that Councillor Winklis has sent his apologies and I'm substituting for him.
Councillor Cheeseman, thank you for substituting for Mr. Winklis, Councillor Winklis. Excellent. Agenda item 3, they're the minutes of the last meeting. Unfortunately, they are not ready to be signed this evening, so we'll sign them when they are available. Agenda item 4. This is for me to invite members of the committee if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or a disclosable non-pecuniary interest. No, thank you. I would like to remind the meeting that where it is possible that a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that a member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item, the member should declare the possibility and then leave the room whilst that item is being considered. Everybody clear? Good. Part B. These are reports for the Planning Committee to decide. Before we step merrily into item 2.1, there is a tabled paper. So, decently, I think, if members want 3 minutes to read that, that's fine, and then we'll start after that. Yes, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if members saw it, but there was an email came through this afternoon from Councillor Baldock.
Yes, there was. Thank you, Councillor Clark. So, yeah, we'll reconvene 10 past. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. So, agenda item number 5, commencing 2.1 25-50-1882-4, land at the north of Lower Road, Tenham. Can we have an officer update, please, first?
No updates, Chairman, other than the letter that's come through from Terham Parish.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I then invite the first of our speakers, Carly Chapman, please. Good evening. Yeah, take the seat. The console in front of you, the button on the left Once you press that, you'll have 3 minutes when you're comfortable. Yeah, that's it. Yep.
So hi, obviously I'm Carly. I've lived in Tenham for nearly 30 years, so my whole life. So I've seen many of changes. I'm here today to speak in favour for the development. The development in question would replace unused land that is not prime agricultural land, so we wouldn't be losing any farmed land. The development proposed is a small site with 23 homes, with off-road parking, nice communal area, including affordable housing, which is a great opportunity for locals to buy local. Tenham is a lovely community village, and small developments as such, I believe, add to our community, as we have a variety of tradies and small businesses which will hopefully bring them more business. I believe growth in Tenham in small doses is beneficial. I believe a small development of 23 homes is unlikely to put any strain on our water, drainage or traffic. We have just had the 2-storey school built, primary school built, so that also leaves plenty of space for new families. I also live nearby to the proposed development, and I was here when the Selby Court and the old school was developed and the flats were also being built. Both sides went ahead and they were completed without any disruptions to the locals. I use this as an example, as the new site that we are discussing would conjoin with the new flat development, so it would also tie in quite nicely. The proposed plans also show a suitable footpath running through the development, which also connects families to the beautiful countryside that Tenham has to offer. It also would improve the junction of Osier Road and Lower Road, as it would increase the visibility. The country road that runs alongside that is often used for diversion route, which Arctic lorries could also use, so there shouldn't be an issue for traffic and HGVs. Basically, all I'd just like to say is that I am in support of it, and I don't really see for any reasonings as to why it should be denied. Thank you.
Carly, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Well within time.
Thank you very much.
I'll be careful with my pronunciation. Miss Teresa, thank you very much. That saved me going red. Good evening to you. Yeah, take the seat. As soon as you're comfortable and ready, press the button and you'll have your 3 minutes.
Good evening. This development has been dismissed by Inspectorate Appeal entirely because of safety concerns about the pedestrian path which runs through the Selby House site to the Lower Road. He considered this outweighed all the benefits of the scheme and overrode the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The inspector identified firstly the narrowness of the access road between Selby House car park and the Lower Road. This has 2 particular pinch points where there would be just enough room for traffic and pedestrians to pass each other, but only just, making it feel unsafe. Secondly, use of the car park as part of the main pedestrian route. The inspector says drivers would be concentrating on manoeuvring, parking or reversing around the small car park, and so may be distracted from pedestrians in this area. This may lead to a greater chance of pedestrian vehicular conflicts, so would be unsafe. The officer's report says the safety issues have been addressed by white markings, signage and bollards on the pedestrian route. I strongly disagree. There is no change in the width of the access road under this application. The plans show a width of 4 metres at the pinch point, but I have measured it on the ground to be 3.4 metres, barely wide enough for a wide van or refuse truck, but leaving no room for pedestrians. Wide vehicles will simply drive onto the marked path. The key switch bollards, as they are installed, will be smashed or flattened, or else they will be kept permanently lowered because they will be too restrictive for traffic. In the car park area, pedestrians have to cross a section where the path is suspended and there are no white markings at precisely the point where there will be most traffic movements and manoeuvrings. It may be a short stretch, but it only takes a second for an accident to happen. Another significant hazard is that the pedestrian route goes right across the area into which refuse vehicles reverse, park and empty bins. Refuse trucks reverse up the narrow access road, a huge danger because the car park is too tight for turning. The council does not provide a refuse service for Selby House for this very reason. The officer's report says that tracking plans have been submitted showing that the refuse trucks can navigate the route with a pedestrian path in place, but there are no plans showing that trucks turning within the site because they cannot. The applicant has submitted a unilateral undertaking which commits the current owners of Selby House to allow for the pedestrian path to be provided and kept, but this requirement does not have to be passed on if the site is sold, so as there is no guarantee this route will be kept forever. There is no justification for a changed decision on this development, and I ask councillors to refuse it. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Teresa. Perfect timing.
Thank you.
And finally, can I invite Mr. Guy Osborne, please? Good evening. Good evening. This seat here, please. Yeah. Again, same procedure. As soon as you're comfortable and ready, press the button, then the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and officers of the council. My name is Guy Osborne of Country House Homes, who are based in Maidstone, and we are the company that have designed the proposed scheme working with the landowner. The scheme has been designed to be policy compliant and to respect the character of the location, this being a transition from the open countryside to the east to the urban settlement of Tenham to the west. The proposed homes are of traditional character, arranged in an irregular fashion and set within a strong rural landscape. The scheme provides a pedestrian footpath through Selby Court and out to Osiers Road, therefore providing a safe pedestrian passage for both future residents of the scheme and for the wider community of Tenham. Just to pick up on a couple of points that the previous speaker has made, the inspector was very clear that the access route, in his view, had a surfacing that was shingle, which he felt was inappropriate, and that there wasn't any demarcation or segregation for pedestrians. We have carried out topographic survey and we have plotted with the officers' assistance the safe pedestrian marking and bollards in order to create a safe pedestrian footway that would go along that path, driveway, and through to the development that's being proposed. The vehicle tracking plans are as part of the suite of documents that have been submitted, and members would be able to review those. I'm sure the officer would be able to provide them. So I appreciate that everyone who sits in this chair promotes that their scheme is the best scheme and the highest of quality, but I'm sure that if members were to critique those plans and details, that they would certainly find that the scheme purports to be that. And given the depth of examination by the planning officer that's been set out in his report, I respectfully request that members support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne, thank you very much. Members, I will move reference number 25-501882-full for approval. Is that seconded, please? Thank you very much indeed. That is seconded. Councillor Braun. The first opening comment, members, is I'm particularly disappointed that Highways have not chosen to either be here or online to make any defence of their statements. However, the reason we are here is because the officers recommendation goes against KCC Highways. You'll notice in the text, page 17, item 5.5 and 5.6. I love the bit however, but even so, we know the clout that KCC Highways have. Right, do we have a ward member? Councillor Bowen. Choose
you do have a
carefully.
ward member, Mr. Chairman, but I'm here as the committee tonight, so I will speak as a committee member in due course.
Fabulous. No other ward members. Do we have any visiting members that wish to speak on this? We don't. Okay, it is open to members. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Bowen.
Thank you. I can understand where the officers are coming from with this. Obviously, it's clear that the inspector last time found there was issues. But work has obviously been done, and something better has come forward to deal with those issues that the inspector raised at that time. However, I think what we are looking at tonight is different to what that inspector looked at that time. And if we've got a better design now, more people are going to use that to the design that the inspector looked at. So if you take that into consideration, I think the risk, it mentions in there about there's concerns with a certain part of the road where pedestrians would have to walk into it. Surely, if we have got a better design now, there's the potential for more pedestrians to use that route than what the inspector looked at that time. So I think it is different. With KCC obviously raising concerns, that's quite rare that they do that. And I think it's something that we do need to push on to get a proper crossing point at that at this time. So it's a different application to what the inspector looked at, so we can't come to the same conclusion at this time.
Thank you, Chairman. As I say, I am one of the ward members and substitute for Councillor Speed tonight, who's got a personal appointment that he couldn't change. So there's a number of things in here, and I would be, if the officer, I'd be great for them. The elephant in the room is, I think, it's to do with the access and the junction. So is it possible to put up an image of the site, particularly on Google Maps, to show the road? And whilst you're doing that, this is one that's difficult. There are some, frankly, and I sit tonight as a planning committee member for Swale Borough Council. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, rather than if I was coming in as a ward member, I'll be saying no. But I'm not here as that at this point, but as a borough-wide look at this. So there are, I think, some advantages. It's 23 houses and we haven't got a 5-year housing supply. That's a tick. The application is kind of in the built-up area. It's not that far from transportation. Kind of a tick there as well. It also has the provision for affordable homes. Tick. So they're all good. But there's always the other side to the coin. It's on agricultural land, best and most versatile, which is a concern. I question, and when we come to the actual site itself and the access, and I appreciate the access has changed. And the speakers were talking about Selby Court and the old squash court, the old Tenham School. The road around this particular bit, the main road, and I've been, similar to the first speaker, I've been a resident in Tenham for over 20 years. That has not changed at all. So if the road is dangerous now, why have we got Selby Court and the squash courts in place? Why is there, as for a determination in due course, there is another planned application for 23 bungalows directly the other side of the bend in the road that is coming forward. I wonder if Kent Highways will have the same opinions at that point. But it is that access, and I'm not convinced at this point whether, and I will listen to the debate and discussion and take my vote accordingly at that point. But I don't see how this addresses the perceived danger on the lower road around that bend area for pedestrians, because the main route area, as far as I can see, isn't being proposed to change. So that you're still going to come out into the same spot onto that main road. The other comment about Tenham School, yes, it has been developed. Yes, this is a new school which opened last year with double the intake, but that's already still at capacity. Is now pretty much at capacity. And with other developments in the area, it's a good thing, but it's not. I don't think it's the be all and end all on this, but it is the issue of the access which is the main concern. It's also, there's a question whether it actually does the proposal retain the rural nature of the area, in particular the lower road, or would this change that? Can the roads take that additional volume of traffic? It's no different from the last 20 years, as I come back to that point. So, is it possible to put the Google map up? Thank you.
Whilst we're waiting for that, Councillor Bone, I'll just come back on your opening statement. I think we need to be careful about using the word dangerous.
No,
dangerous in highways as an official ruling, and I do not believe, unless I'm told otherwise, this is classified as a dangerous road at this point.
It's the line. I think the line of sight it would potentially be questionable, but yes, I agree that there haven't been any sort of, as far as I know, major accidents on that particular part. There have been in other areas, but it's that part from Selby Court into the lower road and the bend there that has, let's say, that's in 20 years plus has not changed. But what has changed is we've got Selby Court and the Old Squash Courts have gone into that site. I will leave it there for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Braun, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question about 3.2 on page 11. The housing provision would include 4 detached open market dwellings. There would be 16 semi-detached dwellings and 3 terraced properties. Would I be awfully presumptuous to assume that the 3 terraced properties would be the affordable housing?
I'm sure we can get there.
Yes, we can, Chairman. Let me just bear with me. I'm having a bit of a nightmare here with my presentation. Here we go. So you can see if I just make this full screen, if it'll allow me. There you go. You can see the red dots are the affordable housing units. So you've got one of the semi-detached to the west of the site, and then you've got a mid-terrace and an end terrace as one of the as the other 2 affordable housing units on the site. Hopefully you can see that from where you're sat.
So they are split, yeah. You happy with that? Councillor Bonnie, please.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say I feel fairly reluctant to go against KCC Highways because they rarely come back with any commentary whatsoever. The lower road is known as a bit of an accident black spot locally. What concerns me is on the design that's up there before you, there's only 5 spaces, car parking spaces, that are not tandem spaces for a 23 house development. And there are not many opportunities to park other than on the main spine road in and out, which looks quite narrow there. So I think what I'm concerned about is knowing that the lower road, and there's the issues that KCC Highways are not happy with. So I really don't think we should be adding to the issues along there. But also internally on the layout, we know on other estates the issues of tandem parking, and it's not best practice, shall we say. We have our Kent design parking standards, but you normally adopt tandem spaces where you are really pushed. And here it's the majority of the houses have tandem spaces. So you've got 2 parking spaces in front of a garage. Now, if I look at the housing split out here for the 23 houses, there's going to be 6 2-bedrooms, 12 3-bedrooms, and 4 4-bedrooms. So I think you have to think realistically, how many cars are going to be there? And is that parking layout suitable? Because this is where we're making that decision tonight. I don't feel comfortable with that design. And certainly what we can't afford is for any cars to spill out of this development onto Lower Road.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Anybody else? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the first time I've ever known highways on a committee I've been on to say there's a safety issue. I know from Highstead, I've beaten Councillor Bonney here, was saying it's a very fast road. Now, as a non-driver, albeit I'm an adult, it really concerns me. And these are going to be family homes with children. Once first you've got to negotiate going through the car park where apparently there is no path, then you're out on Lower Road. People are going to take risks on what happens if the worst happens and someone is killed. For highways to object, it's got to be bad, surely. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Andy, would you like to make an official response to that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just briefly touch on the parking point that Councillor Bonney raised as well, if I may. This is a scheme that is in large part has come before the council previously. It's been through the appeal system, and that's ultimately it was dismissed. But as part of that assessment under the previous application, the parking arrangement was considered acceptable, and the Highways Authority raised no objection to that. The number of parking spaces being provided on site together with the carports is acceptable in accordance with our parking standards.
So if I may come back on that, Chairman.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. We, Swale, are responsible for the internal site layout, not KCC Highways. So KCC Highways, they may or may not make a comment about internal state layout, but we ultimately are responsible for that. And if we get that wrong, as been the history across Swale of many of the estates, where we end up with the calamity of emergency vehicles not being able to get through to properties, and granted, this may have gone through an appeal process, but that probably wasn't highlighted as an issue. But I can say that my experience elsewhere and looking at estates elsewhere, where there is a considerable amount of tandem parking, it's not your first option you pick. So that's my comments on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it is worth noting. Councillor MacDonald, I'll come back. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the only thing I've got, because I don't know the particular road, I would have thought that from the roundabouts there ought to be a speed limit. Now, is there a speed limit on that road? If there isn't, then that is down to the county, and there ought to be, because the rest of it has got developments on it.
Thank you, Jim. The part where you can see the access on that plan is unrestricted at the moment, the speed limit. Further up, where the pedestrian access is proposed to exit out onto, is 30 miles an hour. So there is a limit at that part where the pedestrian access is proposed. I'll come back to Councillor Kavanagh on the pedestrian arrangements. So previously, under the appeal that was dismissed, the inspector had concerns particularly about the unmade surface along that route, the lack of any segregation between vehicles and pedestrians, and part of the reason for refusal previously, when the application was first submitted to the council, related to the onward connection effectively from the site. So previously the red line didn't actually extend to where it extends now. It extended just to the east of Selby House. I think, I don't know if you can see maybe just about you can see the cursor. It's quite unique. Like, we're in a position where typically we obviously wouldn't make a recommendation contrary to what KCC Highways are saying, but under the previous appeal, the inspector very much narrowed the concerns that they had, so particularly in terms of the ongoing pedestrian route. So they talked about, in particular, and the main reason for dismissing, the reason for dismissing the appeal was that pedestrian connection between the very western edge of the site, where actually you can see that red line now near Selby House, and Lower Road. They didn't dismiss the appeal on the basis of the crossing of Lower Road. Once you had got to that point, they focused almost entirely I think it's in the planning history section of the report, page 2 as well, focused entirely on that link between where Selby House is and Lower Road. What the applicant, I don't know if I've got the plans, here we are. What the applicant has done then is directly kind of sought to address the concerns that the inspector had raised and the reasons for dismissing the appeal. So they've introduced the signage and the markings on the road. They've also proposed to resurface the road, which was one of the concerns previously that the inspector had with that route. And they've also introduced a number of bollards in order to provide that physical segregation as well, so to limit that conflict between pedestrians and vehicular users. So this is why we're in a situation where, like I said earlier, it's very unique. We wouldn't go against what Highways, are saying ordinarily. But in this situation, the inspector had previously considered that crossing of Lower Road kind of beyond what's shown on these plans and hadn't dismissed the appeal for that reason. So that's why we're in a position that we're in, where we've got separate material considerations at play that we've had to take into account as officers and then reach the balance that we've reached in the report.
No further hands. Are you pointing, or you are, please?
So around what we can condition for the pedestrian access, does this meet disability access? Can you get a wheelchair across and through that and the surfaces are compliant?
The route's been designed with a 1.2 metre width, which would be sufficient for a wheelchair to get through.
So if someone goes through with a double push chair, because, I know we're talking about pedestrians here, but we have to make sure that, and I'm wondering whether the conditions here are sufficient to, so we see the design there. What I'm concerned about is that ever gets watered down or is not a permanent fixture. So that access, that's in their ownership or out of their ownership. If it's not in their ownership, how is that dealt with? Because if a new owner came along and stopped it up, because then what we're doing is we're creating an estate where you'd be forcing pedestrians onto the road, which we wouldn't have permitted. So we have to make sure that the conditioning will never allow that pedestrian access to be overridden in any way, and it meets the compliance for all users, foot users. Cyclists presumably can use that. And how you segregate, because best practice is you normally have a separate cycleway and you separate, pedestrians, and I think it's called Accessibility for All is the government standard on that. And you have a separate footway and you have a separate cycle path. Perhaps my Green councillor might like to chip in there and agree with me. I remember this discussion because it came up in the Highstead Park inquiry, because there are minimum standards of width.
Andy, I think that can be answered in a fairly short number of words. Does it satisfy footpaths, widths, design in accordance with the rules and regulations that we are bound to?
They've designed
it's a very
it,
short answer.
They've designed it as widely as they can, taking into account the need for refuse vehicles and fire vehicles and that type of thing to go up and down that route. And the route provides obviously a segregation for any cyclists or footpath users or wheelchairs. In terms of the, I don't want to go on too long, but in terms of the question regarding longer term retention, that's to be secured as part of a legal agreement, which would require the owners of the land to agree to as well. So that's what would kind of retain it in perpetuity.
The point I was coming to, thank you for that. The point I was coming to is we don't live in utopia. We can all name at least 2 or 3 large estates near where we live, near our wards or whatever. What we can't ensure is that people firstly park appropriately. People have 2, 3, 4 vehicle spaces on their drives and they still choose to park on the pavement. Yeah, let's not mess about with this. So we can't rule against that. I get the part about disability. I get the part about wheelchairs and buggies. You know, we've all seen people in the road. That's what happens. So I just wanted to make that point. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry. Could we, I'm not 100% sure where the vehicular access is to it. Is it past the old squash courts? Or is there a access on the actual lower road itself?
Yeah, can you zoom right in on that as well so we can see it? Oh, that's better.
So, Councillor Clark, you can see there, that's the vehicular access along Lower Road, further to the east. Then it obviously, when it gets to this part, the western part of the site, that's when it narrows down to the kind of the pedestrian active travel route. So it's not, there's no vehicular access proposed adjacent to the old school up here. It's the vehicular access for the site is further down.
So could I come back, Chair?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so that's good for that. With the pedestrian access going through onto the other part of the site, I presume that's the red lines at the top of the site there. Is this piece of land in the same ownership as the other piece of land where the pedestrian access comes through? And if it's not, is there some sort of easement agreement that's been produced between this developer and the owners of the squash court site and so on?
Yes, so as just previously responded to Councillor Bonney, there's going to be a legal agreement in place which will retain that pedestrian route from the primary part of the sites where the housing is to Lower Road through and past that access road.
Councillor Bonney, one last shot.
Okay, thank you. So the reason I started off around parking is because in most instances these remain in private hands as estates. Now, KCC told us in one of their briefings that they do adopt estates and estate roads. So if this is built and there is condition in there that this is built to an adoptable standard, then, and I don't know what the officers can advise here, whether we put in a condition that KCC do adopt this. And why it's important is when it comes to enforcement of parking and blocking the roads, it's down to the estate company if it stays in private hands. And if you're a resident living near the attenuation pond there, you've got a choice to walk out your door and follow the route, the pedestrian route that's set aside. But what you're going to have to do, if you've got a wheelchair or a pushchair and you've got tandem spaces, you're going to have parking all along that spine road. So you're going to be forced to walk the whole length of that spine road, dodging cars, okay? Because there's no clear pavement to me that I can see there that is easily identifiable as a walking route through the estate. So the other option is you come out your front door and you turn left and you walk straight onto the lower road. We want this to be a sustainable development. We want people to be able to walk and cycle. It has a train station in Tenham, but we've got to allow the residents of these houses to walk out their front door and feel that they're not walking into chaos in order to get to where they want to go to, or they will get in their car. And that's what we want to avoid. But to my mind, if you are sensibly designing this estate, I don't believe that it doesn't do that function for me. And that's why I'm not very happy. So you can put the conditions in. If you approve it, then put the conditions in that KCC adopt this and that the yellow lining and parking system and etc. can be enforced by Swales parking officers, because otherwise it won't happen. And I speak from experience of what's going on in other estates, live, local.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. And following on from Councillor Bonney, who's made some, I think, some really good points there. Just to check a couple of things on this. So from the vehicular entrance exit onto the lower road as it is, that point there at the moment is 60 mile an hour. Would this application reduce that? Because if it doesn't, then actually I take back what I said earlier about there's not been any instance, because there was not a few years ago by the actually on that bend by the building opposite. So I think there is an issue there. The other end, in terms of the pedestrian access, again, if members aren't fully as aware of it, could you scroll back up to the Selby Court bit? The actual area where Selby Court is, you have off of the lower road into the site. It's further up, sorry. You'd come off the lower road, and if you're coming from Tenham Station up there, you would turn left onto that particular site. At which point you have a set of houses on your left-hand side, which goes straight down a few yards. You have the old squash courts, the old Tenham School, which you could have vehicles coming from your right-hand side on that particular bit, and you have vehicles coming from Selby Court. So you've got three small interjections onto that actual entrance into that particular area where that pedestrian access is going to be. You're going to have eyes in the back of your head for this. And I do have a concern. And there are no pavements. When you come off of that site, when you get onto the actual lower road, there isn't a pavement until you have to walk further up the lower road towards Tenham Station on the other side of the road to get to it. There is a pavement on the same side, but that only services the houses actually on the lower road, and then it stops. And I don't think this addresses that concern. You'd have to cross the road. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman, for indulging me.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. With the last word, Andy. I want to come back on those points. I don't believe we can condition it.
No, we can't condition KCC to adopt the road. That's part of a separate statutory process, and it wouldn't be reasonable to impose a condition that may or may not result in the road being adopted. And then, obviously
we could condition that. We could condition that it is to an adoptable standard. Correct?
Yeah, we can add that in. That's fine.
Do you want to carry on, please?
And then in terms of the comments regarding the pedestrian access out onto Lower Road, that was kind of touched on when I responded to Councillor Kavanagh earlier, in terms of when the inspector looked at the previous application, the primary concerns they had were around actually the hatching route, effectively, that's shown on that's shown on the screen at the moment, rather than anything to do with the onward connection, effectively. So they addressed in their assessment when you would come out, there would be a short walk and then you'd cross over very quickly. So they didn't raise concerns as part of the appeal decision with the crossing over Lower Road. The bit they raised concerns with was what is now hatched but wasn't beforehand. So
thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very quick one. I can see from a safety point of view that, and I know we can't tell the county what to do, but there ought to be the 30 mile an hour should start at the roundabout where that Lower Road, further on, not that plan, but further on, it's a nonsense if you're going to be building a load of houses not to reduce the speed. I know it's only on one side of the road, but I think the speed ought to be 30 mile an hour from that roundabout, and that's my professional opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there is no roundabout.
Yeah, there is. Sorry.
Hang on. Let's not drop this into some sort of free-for-all. Councillor MacDonald, thank you very much for your comment.
You see the other plan? It shows something. There we are. What's that? On the right. There's 4 accesses to the right.
is this where? Oh, here we go. Hang on.
That's it.
No, so that's.
Where the 30 should start.
I repeat, I'm disappointed that highways aren't here this evening. No other hands. That has been proposed, that has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. One. All those against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3 abstentions. So that is not carried. Councillor Hunt, you're now going to make a proposal.
I am. I propose that this is deferred for time for the applicant. The applicant is here this evening, has heard what we have said as a committee, the concerns that have been raised. And I think we need some time for the applicant to discuss with officers the concerns that have been raised, to come back with a design that would think that the committee could accept, but also right with the concerns of KCC for discussion with them to overcome their concerns so they can come back to committee without any objections from KCC.
Is that seconded? Councillor MacDonald. Those in favour of that recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those against? Those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That there is carried. So thank you very much indeed, members. That is now deferred to a meeting date yet to be determined. Moving on, please. Page 63 of your agenda pack. This is item 6, agenda item 2.2. Reference number 25-504418. REM, land at Lady Dane Farm, Love Lane in Faversham. We have no speakers registered for this item. Do we have an update, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to provide an update, actually. I would like to clarify the accessibility standards mentioned in paragraph 7.9.4 of the report, which states that all dwellings are designed to M42 standards of the building regulations. However, to clarify, this is only for the affordable homes, with the exception of plots 28 to 31, which meet M43 standards. All private dwellings have been designed to meet part M41. and this continues to comply with the Council's requirements. I have prepared a presentation for members, but I'm happy to go straight to questions and comments if that is preferred. Sure. This application seeks the approval of reserved matters, including layout, scale, appearance, and landscaping, for the final residential phase of the development at Lady Dane Farm. It comprises 70 dwellings, together with associated landscaping, drainage, and auxiliary works. It forms part of the wider Lady Dane Farm development site, whereby hybrid consent was originally granted in May 2023 for a mixed-use redevelopment of the site. Faversham Town Council have objected to the application for the reasons shown and have requested it be determined by the Planning Committee. The Reserved Matters application proposes residential development and an area of open/green space in accordance with the parameter plan approved in the parent hybrid permission. The Council's Urban Design Officer has reviewed the proposal and offers his support, advising that the proposal delivers a well-designed place that follows the principles envisaged in the parent hybrid consent, while responding positively to detailed site constraints and opportunities. The movement framework provides a hierarchy of streets, which, combined with new pedestrian and cycle links, delivers a legible and permeable structure that will integrate positively with the surrounding area. The Reserved Matters submission introduces a range of house types which provide variety in scale and form across the site. Elevations to the dwellings are designed with articulation and depth, with features and materials that directly reference the language established in earlier phases and are reflective of the surrounding character. The boundary treatment strategy include closed bordered fence, wall and double stacked hedgerows appropriately located and responsive to those approved in phase 1. Further details of this are secured by condition 2. Car parking is provided through a balanced mix of on-plot and on-street parking and rear parking court. This varied approach accords with the established design principles and ensures that parking is well distributed and does not dominate the street scene. Sorry, to skip one. The servicing strategy demonstrates the proposal will have suitable vehicle turning and collection arrangements. In regard to drag distances, particularly for plot 142, Waste Services have confirmed that the proposed arrangements are acceptable. Officers consider that the application accords with the development plan, and no other material considerations indicate that a different conclusion should be reached. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out within the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Members, I recommend item 2.2, that's 25-504418-REM, land at Lady Dane Farm, Love Lane, Faversham, in accordance with the officer recommendation. Is that seconded? Councillor Braun, thank you very much. Do we have any ward members that wish to speak? Do we have any visiting members that wish to speak? Goodo. Therefore, members, who wants to start the ball rolling? Councillor Ben Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does sit in my ward, but much like Councillor Bowen, as a member of this committee, I will start by saying my disappointment in the Town Council colleagues who have chosen not to come and tell us why they objected. I do understand that there is a committee meeting of the Town Council tonight, which I would alternatively be at, but that does not negate the point. It doesn't require all 15 of them to be on it. Secondly, realistically, it complies with the original outline permission. It is not a terrible design. I cannot see a reason to not approve it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Also, just to add to that, I'd like to pay note to the across the wider site 35% affordable housing. You know, it's a lot better than you're going to get anywhere else. I don't see any major issues.
as Councillor Bowen would have said, tick. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, under paragraph 7.37, which talks about the housing mix, is that it's disappointing that this doesn't accord, this mix of dwellings does not accord with what Swale would like to see. The whole purpose of building homes is for the need that arises. So that would include 1 and 2 bedroom units, which are most in demand. And I think those of you who sat at Regen and Property last night with Homes England, when we were rather berating them for the lack of delivery of their site, and they were looking at larger properties. And we said, well, actually, if you look at what Swale's need is, it's the smaller units. So, you know, it is down to us tonight. If it isn't what we want, then, you know, this is the place where you should be saying that. And I agree, it's a good level of affordable housing, but it actually, if it's not complying with what we need and what our own research shows we need under a local plan, then what's the point?
Councillor Thompson, please.
I was trying to find it on the notes, but how many are fully accessible, as in single-storey fully accessible units? Was there any? Thank you.
There are 3 houses that are provided to M43 building regulation standards, which means that they're fully accessible. Those are the affordable housing units as well.
Any more? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's just an observation, really. It was something that I mentioned yesterday evening when we were talking to the Homes, or grilling the Homes England guy. It's a shame that some of these developers, or most of the developers, the bigger ones certainly, don't consider building bungalows. Bungalows are traditionally needed in all areas of Swale, and you see them when they go up on the market, they're snapped up within a few days, and they do command a very, very good price as well. So it's not like the developers will be losing anything by actually building, 1, 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows as opposed to mansion boxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Anybody else other than Councillor Bonney, as you've already spoken? Councillor Bonney.
So on repeat from the previous item is I do think there should be a condition in there that the estate roads are built to an adoptable standard. And I think that should be a condition that is standard across all of our permissions, so that there is no excuse as to why KCC have not adopted roads if it's put before them.
No more hands. That has been proposed. That has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Those against? 1. Any abstentions? That is therefore carried in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you very much. Members, moving on. We are now on to agenda item 7, which is 3.1-24502717 outline. This is on page 85 of your agenda pack. We also have a couple of table papers on this. So again, I'll be fair and I'll allow you, as there's 2 papers, 4 minutes. So we will reconvene at 8 minutes past 8, please. Okay, this is agenda item 7, item 3.1, 24-50-27-17- outline, west of Borden Lane, Sittingbourne. Do we have an update, please?
Thanks, Chairman. Evening, Councillors. Only the tabled update that's before you. I have a presentation and a speech available if that would assist why it's in front of you. Thank you, Chairman. Evening, Councillors. I need to share my screen. Sorry. So, the councillors, many of you will remember that application at this site was before you in July, where the application sought outline planning permission with all matters reserved for the erection of a 70-bed care home with parking, landscaping and a substation. The officer recommendation was for approval. The decision of the planning committee was for refusal. The application has gone to appeal, and that is why it's before you, which I'll come on to explain. The site is to the west of Borden Lane. The majority of the site is outside the built-up area boundary of Borden. Very southeast corner of the site tips within the built-up area boundary, but the rest is in the countryside for planning purposes and within the important local countryside gap. The Wises Lane development and the access to it and the parkland and open space is to the north of the site, and Borden Nature Reserve is to the northwest. Councillors will recall from the same planning committee that this was presented at that the other opposite side of Borden Lane was the Riddles Road site, where housing development was proposed, was also refused by the planning committee, and appeal has been dismissed, which we'll come on to in the part 5 session of tonight, and probably in this as well. As is shown there, Borden itself is to the south. This is an indicative plan of the layout of the proposed care home, parking to the rear, access from the northern part of the front site frontage onto the highway. This is indicative because I said all matters are in outline. The application was refused for 2 reasons. The first one relates to the settlement strategy and the conflict with it. The conflict with the important local countryside gap and the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. And the second reason for refusal related to the loss of priority habitat and the proposed development having a detrimental impact on protected species at and within the site. Through the appeals section of the government's planning practice guidance, it is made clear that cases should be reviewed promptly following the lodging of an appeal as part of sensible ongoing case management. From this basis, and noting that the appellant's submissions address elements of the reasons for refusal and provide new assessments and evidence, it's considered appropriate to review the case. Similarly, due to receiving an appeal decision in respect of the site over the road, that's the second reason to invite councillors to consider the position that they reached previously. Officers respect that it was a committee decision, and it's not necessarily the place of officers to undertake that review. Where I'm speaking today, I'll be setting out largely the case of the appellant. It's not necessarily my opinion. It's not necessarily. I'm literally pointing out what is being said, so that I'm then able to represent the council at appeal when it comes to it. There's 2 areas for the committee to review. One relates to the ecology and one relates to the agricultural land. In respect of the ecology, what is shown before you is the government's magic mapping, which, as you'll see, big green square-ish, which is the traditional orchard. Traditional orchard is protected as a priority habitat in all of our legislation and regulations, and very much in respect of the BNG. The traditional orchard is not irreplaceable habitat in the view of the NPPF and BNG legislation. However, policy DP28 does include traditional orchard as irreplaceable habitat, but that's now inconsistent with the NPPF and the BNG legislation. Where the applicant provided assessments before, they were based on the fact that what is effectively 0.8 hectares, just shy of 0.8 hectares of the site was traditional orchard. However, what that map, as you can imagine, is a fairly broad level and isn't a detailed assessment in the opinion of the appellant. I'll keep saying that. And so they've undertaken a new assessment as part of the appeal, which suggests that 0.31 effectively of the frontage of the site is traditional orchard. The remainder is grassland in their opinion. This is based on the use of the definition of a traditional orchard taken from the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, which is consistent with the advice on part of Natural England's website. The ecologists at KCC have reviewed and have agreed that this is that the area of traditional orchard can be considered to be reduced in comparison to the assessment that was provided before. This is very relevant because the amount of lost priority habitat, traditional orchard, on that basis is reduced because the majority of that would be retained and enhanced. The small areas that would be lost would be compensated for by the enhancements and some replacement provisions within the site. There'd be more tree planting, orchard tree planting. This is an indicative plan taken out of the landscaping details at the ecology submissions. The round circles, the round trees that are shown to the south and west and within the building almost are proposed orchard trees. The ones at the frontage are those which are existing. These are aerial photos that have been provided from the applicant's case. They set out how, to the picture on the left is what it was like in 2009, and the image on the right is 2025, not 2005 as the title says. The basis for an assessment of the traditional orchard now is that there has to be a minimum of 5 trees and their canopies have to be within the edge of their canopies have to be within 20 metres of each other. So applying that different interpretation, the area of traditional orchard would be far reduced. That's a parameter plan that's been provided by the applicant as part of both the application and the appeal, which is the area of traditional orchard that they're proposing would be retained. That's the issues in respect of the traditional orchard. There would be a small loss in reduction of priority habitat traditional orchard at the site. That's proposed to be mitigated, like I said, through enhancements of what would be retained as well as the replacements. There's also, in terms of biodiversity units, through the biodiversity net gain metric, there would be an uplift in terms of the number of units at the site. There's not enough gain to comply with the BNG 10% requirement, so there would be an off-site provision which is allowed for within the BNG mechanisms. Sticking with the ecology reason for refusal, the other element was the impact on protected species at and within the site. No objection was raised previously by KCC ecologist. The applicant provided a preliminary assessment and an assessment of the value of the site with the original application. That's been supplemented by badger surveys and a further assessment as part of the current application. All of that concludes that the value of the site could be, and any impacts on it could be mitigated through precautionary measures during the development. Like I said, the badger survey has been undertaken. There are some within the vicinity. I'll be vague as to where they are because obviously they're protected and we have to be careful about where they are. However, the case is that the impacts on badgers can be dealt with through a licence, which would need to be obtained from Natural England. And in terms of the impact on Baldon Nature Reserve, which is to the northwest, again, the KCC ecologists did raise some concerns at the time of the original application. They were satisfied that if we were to approve it, a buffer around the edge of the site with planting, which at the request of KCC Ecology, they'd rather have as proper buffer planting, tree planting, rather than grassland. to assist with that buffer and provide protection from lighting. That would be conditionable through the reserved matters, or addressed through the reserved matters where landscaping is reserved, or through a condition. So from that basis, there was no objection at the time. The reason that the Riddles Road development is partially relevant on the other side, and the appeal decision is partially relevant, is that there was a similarity in the reasons for refusal, that they both referred to protected species at and within the sites. In that case, the inspector disagreed with the position of the council, and concluded that the appeal shouldn't be dismissed for that reason. It's dismissed for other reasons, but not on the basis of ecology. This is a different site. I've set that out in the report, that the sites are different. This has priority habitat. This has a different relationship with Baldon Nature Reserve. It's the other side of the road. It's closer. It's got a different setting. The sites are different, and one appeal decision doesn't necessarily have to be replicated at another site. However, it is a relevant material consideration by virtue of being an appeal decision in such close proximity and addressing a similar reason as part of that reason. I've got some photos of the site, but they're probably not overly relevant. I'm sure you're familiar. The other element relates to the first reason for refusal, which, in terms of the important local countryside gap and the settlement strategy, nothing's changed. There is a policy conflict. That was true before, and it was true now. How you weigh that is a matter for you as the planning committee, or you're not a decision maker anymore, the inspector is, but how we respond to that is for you. The reason for a discussion about this reason for refusal relates to the best and most versatile agricultural land. For DM31, there's various tests. Previously, the applicant didn't comply with all of them, but they now have, on the basis that they've submitted. There's three tests. One is there an overriding need that cannot be met on land within the built-up area boundary? And the applicant's case is that there is and was previously supported, is that there is a need, and this was previously supported by the officer report before. There's a test around, are there any alternative sites available with a best and most versatile land grade of less than 3A, or would the use of lower grade land work against sustainable development? And the applicant has provided an alternative sites assessment which concludes that there aren't any other sites available, and development should not result in the remainder of an agricultural holding becoming unviable or lead to an accumulated and significant losses. The case is that the site isn't used for farming in such a way, or is part of a holding that would cause the proposal to conflict with that policy. The case of the applicant is that even if it was restored to a orchard use, it's a very small parcel of land and wouldn't make a meaningful contribution to the viability of any holding. Again, I stress this is all the case of the applicant. So in terms of why it's before you tonight, we'd like your steer, please, on how you'd like us to proceed in relation to the reasons for refusal. In respect of that first reason for refusal, as I see it, you've got three options. You could maintain the reason for refusal in respect of all of it, and the agricultural land element of it exactly as it was before. You could determine that the agricultural land aspect of it has been adequately addressed and justified, and withdraw that element of the first reason for refusal. Or the nuclear option is that you could conclude that the best and most versatile agricultural land has been addressed to such an extent that this is grounds for you to rebalance the whole weighing up exercise and reach an entirely different decision in respect of that first reason for refusal. They are your options. It's not for me to say what you should do, but I think that's probably the only three you've got in respect of that reason for refusal. In respect of the ecology reason for refusal, again, it's fairly similar options. You can conclude that the circumstances of the two sites and the new evidence from the applicant is not reason to reach a different decision, and we proceed as we are. You could conclude that the additional ecology submissions and the nearby appeal decision separately or in combination are grounds to review the second reason of refusal, and on doing so, you could conclude that only part of the reason for refusal should be defended, i.e. you could downgrade it to address specific parts rather than the whole of that reason for refusal. Or you could conclude that the submissions entirely address the concern that was raised before, and you could withdraw the second reason for refusal. There's a fourth option that's been circulated in the tabled update before you around amending the decision or that reason for refusal. I suggest that's not appropriate. In the context of an appeal, altering reasons for refusal upwards is at risk of being construed as unreasonable behaviour. I don't think the suggestions that have been included within that really add anything that wouldn't be discussed anyway. And so I'd refrain from doing that one in my opinion, but it's your decision. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Ian. Right, we have some speakers this evening, so can I firstly welcome Parish Councillor Mr Lee Small, representing Borden Parish Council, please. Evening, Councillor Small. You've been here before. You know the procedure. When you're good and comfortable, press the button and the time is yours.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors and officers. Thank you. Borden Parish Council maintains its objection to this application. Policy DM31 is explicit that development on agricultural land is only permissible where there's an overriding need that cannot be accommodated within existing built-up area boundaries. The applicant has provided a list of sites they consider unsuitable or unavailable, but this does not demonstrate that the identified need cannot be met within those boundaries. Swale continues to have a significant number of brownfield sites awaiting redevelopment, including land held by Homes England. The applicant has not provided any overriding justification for building on protected traditional orchard, a landscape feature that has historically defined the character of this area. The applicant's revised land usage assessment and characterisation rely on a different methodology that produces a more favourable outcome for the proposal. The Natural England Magic 2024 data, used by the previous ecology company, lists the complete site as traditional orchard rather than just the fragments used in the applicant's current report. The development itself remains materially unchanged from the original application. The only substantive physical amendment is a revised planting scheme incorporating additional hedgerow, which does not alter the scheme's scale, visibility, or overall landscape impact. A change in methodology cannot substitute for genuine mitigation, nor does it justify a different planning conclusion when the underlying effects remain the same. Regarding the second reason for refusal, the Parish Council considers the current application materially different from the Riddles Road application. The updated ecology survey and lighting scheme fail in several key respects to address the issues previously identified. For example, impact on lighting on the protected species. The application site sits significantly higher than Borden Nature Reserve. Any lighting introduced at this elevation would have a major impact on protected and nocturnal species. This issue has not been addressed by the applicant. Noise impact from the proposed substation. The requirement for an on-site electrical substation would introduce unacceptable low-level noise. The indicative plan places the substation directly adjacent to the nature reserve. There's no alternative location within the site that would avoid harm. Failure to protect identified species. The existence of the fiery clearing moth has not been mentioned, even though there's an area within approximately 150 feet of the site where they've been transplanted from the Wises Lane development under licence from Natural England. As you'll be aware, KCC Ecology provides a verification service only and does not undertake site visits. Their desktop assessment is entirely dependent on the accuracy and completeness of the information supplied by the applicant and their consultants. If that information is incomplete or incorrect, KCC is not in a position to raise objections. This is a fundamental flaw in the swale planning process. We therefore ask you to uphold your existing decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Small. Can I invite now, please, Sarah Booker, please? Good evening to you. When you're comfortable, press the button and your 3 minutes will start.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Before I turn to substance, I must address process. This appeal had properly escalated to the Secretary of State. That is the appropriate arena for a decision of this scale and consequence. For it now to be drawn back to this committee under the pretext of reviewing grounds risks appearing like less of a procedural tidying and more like an attempt to reset the playing field. When an appeal has progressed to state level, returning it locally creates an unavoidable perception that a second opportunity is being engineered after refusal. That is not how public confidence in planning is maintained. If the local authority believed in the strength of its original refusal, it should have allowed that decision to be tested transparently at state level and not rerouted mid-course. Turning to substance, I will focus on the two matters identified. First, the Countryside Gap. This site forms part of the same Countryside Gap and rural corridor considered in the recent appeal decision relating to the Riddles Road development. That site sits directly opposite this one, on the other side of Borden Lane. In planning terms, they are part of the same continuous landscape that maintains the separation between Sittingbourne and Borden. In dismissing that appeal, the planning inspector placed substantial weight on protecting the openness and function of the Countryside Gap, concluding that development would erode the spatial separation between settlements. The same policy considerations apply here, if not even more, with the February 2025 Swell Important Local Countryside Gap Review explicitly suggesting these orchards offer an opportunity for conservation. The land currently forms part of an open agricultural landscape that contributes directly to the corridor of undeveloped countryside. The applicant has unilaterally reduced the mapped area of the orchard from 0.797 hectare to 0.31 hectare by claiming some areas are garden. Even if landscaping were proposed at a later stage, the fundamental loss of openness would remain permanent. Ecology and protected species. This site sits immediately alongside a designated nature reserve and currently functions as part of a wider wildlife corridor. Evidence collated by local residents includes CCTV footage showing badgers actively entering a set located beneath the proposed development site. Additional footage shows badgers travelling across neighbouring properties from a Dacian nature reserve into this field, demonstrating that the site forms part of an established territory and movement route. A care home is a continuous 24-hour operation. Permanent external lighting, vehicle movements and regular human activity create ongoing disturbance, particularly during nighttime hours. The ecology implications extend beyond badgers. The Naturing Neighbour Reserve has lots of protected species, including bats, newts, birds of prey. Introducing a permanently institutional building and associated activity directly is disrupting feeding routes and affecting wider ecology problems. Under the MPPF and local plan DM28, the response to degrading priority habitats should be restoration and sensitive management, not a justification for its removal. You cannot replace the complex ecosystem of a century-old orchard soil and root system with instant new planting. There is a significant time lag before a new orchard provides the same habitat of value. Finally, I would like to briefly reflect the concerns of the immediate neighbouring residents. For those living directly beside this field, the proposal would introduce a large, continuously operating institutional building where there is currently open countryside. They are concerned about loss of privacy and the constant activity and disturbance that a 24-hour facility would bring. One neighbouring resident is currently in remission from cancer and has expressed genuine concern about how sustained noise and disruption may affect their well-being and recovery. And for those reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to uphold the Council's original refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I now please have Ryan Nichols, please? Good evening, Mr. Nichols. Again, as you've heard, when you're comfortable and ready, press the button and you'll have an equally flexible amount of time.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Thank you to officers for the overview of the Riddles Road appeal and its implications. The starting point for this appeal is the fact that the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply and the tilted balance is engaged. This sets a high bar for the level of harm needed from adverse effects in order to warrant refusal. They must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. On the reasons for refusal, on agricultural land, in order to satisfy the policy, the proposal must demonstrate a clear need for development. The care home needs assessment does this, which the council does not contest in this appeal. The proposal must also demonstrate that land of a lower agricultural grade is not available to accommodate the development confirmed by the comprehensive alternative site assessment report provided. This policy requirement is met. In the Riddles Road appeal decision, as has been confirmed in other appeal decisions and officers' reports, the inspector states that the out-of-date nature of the local plan and the lack of 5-year housing land supply requires only limited weight to be attributed to adverse effects in relation to the settlement strategy. Similar reasoning applies to the important local countryside gap policy. This is a spatial policy and its intent is to prevent the merging of two distinct settlements. The proposal will not result in the merging of Borden and Sittingbourne, an important distinction from the Riddles Road appeal scheme. This site is bounded by wooded defensible boundaries to the north, which prevent merging in the future, achieving the principal aim of this policy. For these reasons, only limited weight at most can be attributed to any harm against this matter. Any limited harm identified cannot reasonably be considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the many significant and substantial benefits as listed in the original officer's report, and therefore this reason should be removed in its entirety. Reason 2 comprises 2 elements. The site is classified as traditional orchard priority habitat on the government's magic maps. However, these maps are not based on site-specific survey data, but historical mapping and aerial imagery. A site-specific survey has been undertaken applying the government's orchard definition, which requires at least 5 trees with crowns less than 20 metres apart. The site has not been managed for many years and has lost at least 14 orchard trees. The result is that only the front of the site meets the definition of being traditional orchard, and this area is to be retained and enhanced under a parameter plan, which future reserve matters applications will have to adhere to. Consequently, there will be an overall gain of traditional orchard area when taking account of the retention and the proposed enhancements. The proposal would enhance and secure future management of an orchard that would otherwise reach the end of its lifespan in the short term and disappear completely. Therefore, the proposal will have a beneficial effect on traditional orchard, and this matter should not form part of a reason for refusal. The Riddles Road costs award against the council is clear in relation to protected species. There is insufficient evidence to substantiate this reason for refusal. As with the Riddles Road appeal, this appeal includes a full set of surveys and mitigation measures deemed appropriate by KCC Ecology. The costs award also confirmed that the notion of a general squeezing of habitat is not evidence to sustain a reason for refusal. Reason for refusal 2 should also therefore be removed in its entirety. Despite having incurred costs today in preparing and pursuing the appeal, I can confirm that should the committee decide to withdraw both reasons for refusal in their entirety, Aspire waives any right to pursue costs against the council in any matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Members, I will move the officer recommendation as detailed on page 85, reference number 24-50, 2717-outline. Just to refresh before we get underway, we're not looking for brand new reasons. Okay. I don't like being embarrassed, and I'm fairly sure you don't like being embarrassed, and I know our professional team don't like it. So let's be careful. Ian read out the summary and conclusion, which is detailed on page 91 and 92 of your agenda pack. I'm going to steer you towards that as the starter. Okay, so we're not here to reinvent the wheel, despite promises of potential financial lifting. Right, I have recommended. Has that been? Thank you, Councillor Braun. That is seconded. Councillor Hunt.
I've got something to say, Chair, on this, but just,
I hope you have, Councillor.
Good. But just checking, what have you just proposed and seconded? Because we haven't actually got anything, a recommendation.
The recommendation is to obtain a position that this committee would be happy with in moving forward. Now, bearing in mind, page 86, the decision's already been made to turn it down.
Exactly.
At page 86, the hearing is scheduled for 10 o'clock on the 31st of March. And the officers need to put a submission in by the 9th of March, which is 4 days' time. So it doesn't give us a lot of time. So the recommendation has already been made. I'm looking for anybody that wishes to add or subtract from that in line with the conclusion and summary on page 91, 92.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything you wish to add to that, Councillor Hunt?
I will add now what I was going to say.
Superb.
I mean, it's quite... Well, what we have to deal with, I said it before and officers say it, that we have to deal with evidence. The evidence that we've got, that we've been given, is the recent appeal decision. That is clear evidence that we have to take account of in this application. I think we have to remember that this has been refused already. Whatever we do tonight isn't going to be changing that. There is a refusal that's forward and it's gone to appeal and it's an inspector that's going to be deciding it. We're not changing that. What we need to do is look at those reasons, basically work out if we're going to have any costs against us, because taking the evidence that has been recently from the adjacent site, I think there's a high chance that if we don't remove reason 2 for the ecology, that we will have even more costs against us. It's clear in the report from the officers the reasoning why this isn't probably a good idea. So I would say that the second part of that ecology reason should be removed. The first part is relevant. I think it's still worth pursuing that at the appeal. You do have to think about the balance, and I think probably if it was the first time round, I wasn't here when that was discussed last. I think the balance is probably should be in favour of approving it, but we are in a position that reason has already gone through for refusal, and that first reason should stand still, and that's what we should fight at appeal. But if we carry along with the ecological part, I think we will have costs against us. So need to bear that in mind.
You done? Thank you. Ian, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's might be a nuanced point, but in the tabled updates before you, I've made a point of setting out that costs isn't land use, and planning decisions should be based on land use. There's a few interesting case laws. Well, interesting might not be the word, but officers can point out that there's potential cost and reputational issues arising from losing an appeal, losing an award of costs. However, what's before you tonight should be judged on planning merits and basically considering whether what's before you is sound, or the reasons for refusal remain sound in light of what else has been put before you or you've seen. That's a planning judgment based on material planning considerations. The risk, threat, potential for an application or an award of costs should be put to one side and focus on the planning judgment and making sure that what we take to the inspector is sound on planning grounds. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Bonney.
Blimey, didn't think you're going to get round to me that quick. Right, okay, thank you. I've scribbled lots of notes from the speakers and from Ian's introduction, so thank you. Now, then you may remember at the last committee, it'll probably stick in your mind that I was helping out a beekeeper, and it happened to be on this site. So I went back through my photos, because I've got an enormous log of photos, and one of those shows that I was on site in 2017. And when I was being mentored by that beekeeper, obviously I spent quite a lot of time on that site. There was a lot of beehives on that site. It was at least 9. I think from memory, he actually had 13 on the go there. Now, you don't put 13...
Councillor Bonney, is there going to be a question after this?
Yes, there will be, yeah.
No pots of honey?
So no pots of honey.
Just, please, yeah.
Absolutely, right. And why that is important, because this speaks to you about the ecology on site and the trees that were there, that were present, and the fact that Magic Maps puts this firmly in the traditional orchard and what you can do with traditional orchards. So this is definitely priority habitat that is right next to a local wildlife site. And what I witnessed on the site on the few occasions that I went there with the beekeeper to see what his bees were up to is I didn't witness a garden, and I think that's a bit of a red herring. What I saw was grass, long grass, short grass. The barn that was on the site at the front was used for storing the beehives, but it was what I call sort of an agricultural barn thing. So for all intents purposes, that was a traditional orchard with the traditional use of bees on site. There was a little ride-on mower, I think it was, or tractor thing in the shed. So I can safely say that was then, and then I think I went back in about 2020. Can't remember, but I was definitely on site in 2017. So I think it's rather disingenuous that, you know, it suddenly stops being traditional orchard because somebody fails to maintain that. It has an ecosystem, and what I remember talking about was the connectivity with the neighbouring wildlife site. And to my mind, the two reasons that we set upon have not changed. And where there was an indication of where the building would be, because this is outline, remember, and I talked about the connectivity, and of course this being a local countryside gap as well, and this sort of arc effect, because that application came afterwards, the one that's just, we won on the refusal on appeal. And I think that stands, that countryside gap in the balance, that is a local plan policy. It stood in an appeal, and I don't think we should change that. The reasons on ecology. Now, what we learnt, and I've said this privately to officers, but I might as well say it in public now, is that KCC ecology rely entirely on desktops. They do not come out on site. And they were caught with their pants down in the Highstead Park inquiry when we started talking about ancient woodland and tracks. And they were not aware of those tracks and the usage. And they couldn't be aware of what was going on that site because they'd never been there. And that's ditto here. I've been on that site, haven't been into the wildlife reserve. But what we can say is KCC archaeology are relying on Google Maps and an applicant's desktop study. And what we've heard is we've heard local knowledge. I've got my local knowledge of what I've witnessed, and I think that reason still stands. And I think Natural England are, you know, we have priority habitats for a reason. Just because someone fails to manage their land does not mean it should stop being. It should be about restoration, management and enhancement. And I don't feel that this application that's before us does that. BNG gain is a bit of a red herring here, as is their sort of perception of it somehow being garden at some point, because that would have required planning as well. If it was flipping from agricultural use to garden use, that would have required planning, and that's not been mentioned there. So I still stand by, I think, and I do think the committee should stand by those two reasons. Thank you.
So there was no question. Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry if I misled.
Councillor Thompson.
A few things really. One is the MPPF and BNG, both created by developers. So it's worth bearing in mind it contradicts those that are put in place, especially topicologists, a lot of the time. And this is a really good example of that. Once you've got an area that is next to another zone, as soon as you put a building in the middle, fragmentation occurs. So ecology deprivation is bad. It's going to happen. It goes against what we're currently trying to achieve, which is defragmentation. So I totally disagree with that section. I think we should, as with Councillor Bonney, totally stick with the ecology side of things. The other one is the countryside gap. I'd just like to see, if we had one, a map of where the other road goes in for the other proposal that's already been agreed. Which is it true there's a road going in just up from? Because what it means is there's already a squeeze on that countryside gap. So it would take a massive chunk away. So the identity of Borden, the spirit of Borden, would be pretty much lost on that side, as we can see already. So again, due to the squeeze on ecology and due to the countryside gap, it would fundamentally affect the whole area. So I think I agree totally with Councillor Bonney. We should stick with those particular points. I think that's all I got. Oh no, the other point was farming. Would like to argue the point very strongly against them saying that it's too small a zone. Wouldn't advocate a use for agriculture. It's grade 1. ME13 Market Garden survives on 1/3 of an acre. It runs a living off 1/3 of an acre. They'd love to find other spots to expand. We had this problem down at Brogdale when it was never put forward for agricultural use for the old greenhouses. 3 different people wanted to use those greenhouses for agricultural use. We've got the same situation here. This has probably never been put forward for agricultural use under horticulture. And if we did a no-dig system, we actually would get probably some biodiversity net gain because it would work in harmony with the ecology. So I think that's, again, another red herring. So we're getting thrown a lot of things and just hoping that people don't pull them up on it. That would be a very, very farmable small section of ground, especially with the mycorrhizal activity that's probably within the base of that orchard, which is why it becomes a high priority site. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chairman. Here we have to think with our heads, not our hearts. Now, I'm all for wildlife, but the decision from Riddles Road, I think, is quite significant. I know Wises Lane development, everything, including the badgers, is all being dealt with by licence. It can all be put away under condition. I don't have to like it, but that seems to be what the legal position is. Now, I feel for Ian, if he's then defending something that legally maybe is hard to defend, because we think with our hearts and we think of the wildlife, but the system is against us. So there's my difficulty, and I know it's not about costs, but I'm sure when it goes to appeal, it will be said that the wildlife, whatever wildlife that is, can be dealt with by condition. So personally, I don't think we're going to win that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Chair. My limited experience, I have a question for clarification on it. And I agree with Councillor Bonney on local knowledge, and there's no dispute about that. My question relates to, as was said, KCC doing desktop exercising and throw data into a computer and it comes out with this, and we'll look at a Google map. What will as part of the appeal, what will they look at? Will they be doing a desktop exercise themselves? I'm assuming that's probably the way they will do it. And in which case, are we fighting a losing battle anyway? Because they won't have that local knowledge, which is incredibly important. But the procedure says, we'll just look on the computer. I just want that clarification. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just very quickly on the second page of the tabled amendment, it says that there's inadequate surveys and assessments have been provided in respect of the presence of, and then it's got various animals. Quite frankly, if it is next to an ecology site, you know, and we did hear some evidence that there was various things like badgers, and I'm not sure about newts, but so my question is, should the applicant have provided those things? Because if they haven't, then that's inadequate in my view. And then, of course, there's if it's developed in this way, you've then got the interference from the lighting and the rest of it, which it says in this second page of the report that's been done for us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I see no further hands. Ian, there's a couple of points. Can you come back to them, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Begin with Councillor Bowen. An inspector will... I can't speak for the inspector's qualifications or their experiences or their knowledge, but there's a fair chance, I'd imagine, that the inspector would be a planner as opposed to an ecologist. They'd visit the site. So in comparison to what you're saying about KCC not visiting the site, ecologists, then there would be a difference. On parking, which is relevant, bear with me, an inspector will almost always say in their decision that when they visit a site and see how good, bad or otherwise the parking is, it's a snapshot in time at that specific point in time when they visited. An inspector will visit during the day on hopefully bright sunlight, so they might not see any particular species that don't come out in daylight, or etc. etc. So what an inspector will be guided by the evidence that is before them. This is what we saw on Riddles Road, where I think a paragraph in the decision says that the inspector noted the case that was made by local residents in respect of what they had seen, but I think the appeal decision in that case was mostly guided by the outcome, by the evidence that was put before it by the applicants, ecologists in that case, and then the fact that the KCC ecologist didn't raise an objection was mentioned in the reason as part of the grounds to not refuse the application on that basis. In terms of Councillor MacDonald's comments, the applicant provided a assessment when the application was submitted and did further surveys more recently. The ecology survey that was provided in the first, when the application was before you assessed the value of the site for all kinds of species, and came up with various mitigation, avoidance, compensation measures. That ecologist was satisfied that the proposal was acceptable. The KCC ecologist, who doesn't visit the site, but we don't ask them to visit the site because we deal with hundreds of applications and they can't visit all of them, they didn't have an issue with the application, and the new evidence that we've got with this appeal hasn't flagged any issues, nor would it, because it's the appellant's own submissions. So, but the point moving forward is that we would need to demonstrate that there would be harm at the appeal in relation to the reason for refusal that's been given. That's the case that we would have to make if the option is taken to proceed on that basis.
Thank you very much. I see no more hands. Right, we're here to make a decision, members. Let's deal with page 91 first.
Sorry, Chair. I'm working off the online thing, so I don't have a 90.
Okay, so it's item 5.2 on the summary and conclusion.
5.2. Okay, thank you.
Is anybody in favour of item C on 5.2? Right, we'll strike C. That leaves us with A or B. Councillor Hunt.
I propose that we go with A.
Those in favour of item 5.2A, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, 5.3. Is anybody in favour of item 3, little 3? I see no hands. We'll strike that. Yep. Councillor Hunt. You want to move forward? No? Glad you came. I'll go with 1. Those in favour of 1, please show. As quick as you like, come on. We're going for 5.3, item 1. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Jeepers creepers. Put your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Any advance on 12? No. Those against? 1, 2, 3. That is the greater number, so 5.31. Okay. Members happy? Ian, do you want to come back at this stage? You know where we're going.
Thank you for the steer, councillors.
Fabulous.
No pots of honey.
Thank you for it. That'll be in the post, yeah. Miss Councillor Thompson. Is it a magic trick or you somebody? Yeah, of course. No worries. That's fine. Thank you for attending. Members, agenda item 8. This is the part 5s. Thanks, Terry. Presuming everybody has read the 3 items, does anybody want to talk about 5.1? 5.2? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a bit of an odd one, actually, because it's partly in Baldon and Grove Park ward, and it's partly in Homewood ward. So, obviously, speaking as a Homewood ward member, I'm very pleased with this decision. The only fly in the ointment, if you like, is partial costs was awarded against the council, which I think is rather disappointing when the appeal has been dismissed. Thank you.
Councillor Bonney.
I think this is coming up quite often now, is around issues of ecology. And I would like, I don't know how this works, but I really would like the council to assess the contract that they have with KCC. Because in everything property related, everything is unique, everything is different. And unless you see it, you can't make any kind of judgment. And I really do feel strongly that we need our consultants that are making an opinion or a decision. And in certain instances, we're finding that, you know, locals will say one thing and they're saying something completely different because they're reliant on desktop stuff. I really would like to see that they visit site. And I granted, there are a lot of sites, but you know, especially where there are large applications, they need to have seen it. We can't get away from that.
No, totally agree. The fillet steak on the menu that you see on your laptop isn't necessarily the one you get fed. It's a good point, well made. Where LGR will figure into that, we don't know, but I think we might be too late for that boat.
Well, I think we should look at that now.
Yeah,
it needs to be done now. We don't want to be in the LGR thing. It won't ever happen.
I'm sure there'll be an appropriate committee that can pick that up. 5.3. Councillor, are you on 5.2, Councillor?
Yeah, 5.2. Sorry,
Yeah,
didn't look
shoot.
this way. I just think it's a good one for committee members to look at. That obviously this was, I did look back because again I wasn't here on that night, but this was one that was recommended for approval and the committee went against it. I think what this does show is that obviously the committee can go against officers and get a good result, but it has to be the right decisions. And that's where you can have all costs awarded against us, because that was a poor decision that was put forward. It's just lucky that the other one did go forward. So we have to get the clear reasons for refusal that are not unreasonable put forward, and this clearly shows that.
Yeah, thanks for that. You stole my thunder. I always say keep the planning inspectorate pages at the back of this document. It's keeping it home as a file. It's good to refer back to. Anybody else on 5.2? No, 5.3. Councillor Martin.
Firstly, absolutely ridiculous appeal to put in the first place. It was essentially a developer running down the clock to get out of making a contribution towards health service facilities when putting in an old person's scheme. I cannot explain how angry not only the councillors in Faversham were, but the general public were when they saw the appeal had been lodged. Thank you very much to the officers for defending the case in the way that it was and ensuring that they do have to make contributions at the levels that were originally set by the statutory consultees. It goes to show that actually running down the clock to try and get away without paying the bill does not work, and long may that continue.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Anybody else on 5.3?
I just think that, you know, sticking to your guns and being robust on stuff and saying we want these things enforced and not keeling over just because we might get a bit of flack. I think, you know, we've justified in what we've decided. So thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I tried not to get too deeply into the conversation, but I don't like a member of, the applicant coming to a meeting and suggesting we'll waive costs. I don't like that. You know, we're not here to do that. And wouldn't we look a load of prunes if we just said, oh, crikey, let's do that? You know, we'd be ripped to shreds elsewhere in this county. So, yeah, good point, well made. With that all said, thank you very much indeed for your contributions this evening. I formally close the meeting at 9:05. Have a good, safe journey home. Thank you.